He never noticed her until he heard that phone call. Jealousy revealed what his heart had been denying all along, and everything changed. Where are you watching this story from? Subscribe to the channel and leave a like. The ending will move you. The tea grew cold on the desk as Ethan signed contracts without really reading them. 3 years doing the same thing, at the same time, with the same people. Routine tasted of ash, and he hadn't even noticed when he'd started living on autopilot. The office door opened with a familiar creak. Natasha entered carrying a stack of documents, her chestnut hair pulled into a bun that already threatened to come undone. She never looked directly at him, always at the papers, at the computer screen, anywhere but his face. "This afternoon's reports, Mr. Winters," she said in that professional voice that sounded almost mechanical. Ethan nodded without looking up. She placed the folders on the desk and turned to leave. Her heel struck the wooden floor 3 times before he heard the sound, a low laugh, muffled, as if Natasha was trying to hold it back, but couldn't quite manage. He raised his head. She was in the corridor, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand covering her mouth. The laughter escaped between her fingers, crystalline, alive, so different from the voice she used with him that it seemed to come from another person. "You're impossible," Natasha whispered into the phone, and there was a brightness in her eyes that Ethan had never seen. "Meet you at 8 then. Don't be late this time." When she hung up and returned to the adjacent office, Ethan remained frozen, pen suspended in air, chest tight with something he couldn't name. Who was that person on the other end of the line who could draw that kind of joy from her, and why the hell did it matter to him? The afternoon dragged like cold honey. Ethan reviewed the same figures 4 times without absorbing anything. His meetings were a blur of voices that entered one ear and left through the other. When the clock struck 6 in the evening, he was still there, pretending to work, waiting. Natasha left promptly at 6:15 as always. This time Ethan watched from the window as she crossed the street. He saw when a blue car stopped at the corner. He saw when she got in, smiling. He saw the car disappear into traffic, taking with it something he didn't even know he wanted. That night, Ethan slept poorly for the first time in years. The next morning, everything seemed different. The light entering through the office windows had a strange quality, more intense, revealing details that had always been there but that he'd never noticed. The way Natasha organized documents, smallest to largest always, the small succulent planter she kept on her desk, the simple silver ring she wore on her little finger. "Good morning," he said when she arrived. Natasha blinked, surprised. In 3 years, Ethan rarely greeted her. "Good morning, Mr. Winters. How was your weekend?" Her eyebrows rose slightly. "It was good. And yours?" Ethan didn't know what to say. His weekend had been like all the others, gym on Saturday morning, lunch with his parents on Sunday, loneliness filling all the spaces in between. Productive, he lied. During the week, Ethan began to pay attention. Natasha always arrived 15 minutes early, but never clocked in until exactly 8. She brought lunch from home in a pink container with cat stickers. She drank green tea instead of coffee. She hummed quietly when she thought she was alone, songs Ethan didn't recognize but that had gentle melodies. And every Tuesday and Thursday at 6:15, the blue car picked her up. Jealousy grew like a poisonous plant, coiling around Ethan's chest. He had no right to feel this. Natasha was his employee, nothing more. She had her life, her commitments, her joys that didn't involve him in any way. But knowing that didn't make the feeling any less real. On Friday, Ethan did something impulsive. When Natasha left for lunch, he entered her office. The desk was impeccably organized, pens aligned, post-its in coordinated colors, a photo in a simple frame. The photo showed a younger Natasha, perhaps 18 or 19, embracing a boy with messy hair. Both smiled at the camera with that carefree quality only youth allows. On the back of the frame, an inscription in cursive, "Marcus and Tash, best friends forever." Ethan left the photo exactly where it was, but the image remained etched in his mind. Marcus. The name tasted bitter. When Natasha returned from lunch, she found a cup of green tea still warm on her desk. She looked around, confused, but Ethan was already locked in his office, heart beating too fast. Small gestures began to escape his control. A box of chocolates on Natasha's desk on Mondays, reminders for her to take breaks during the day, questions about films she'd mentioned liking, books she'd mentioned reading. Each interaction was a test, an attempt to cross the distance he himself had created with 3 years of indifference. Natasha responded with politeness, but there was something in her eyes, hesitation, perhaps distrust, as if she were waiting for the moment when everything would return to normal, when Ethan would stop noticing she existed. The routine began to change. Meetings became longer because Ethan asked questions he'd never asked before, seeking Natasha's opinion on strategies and contracts. She responded with surprisingly sharp insights, ideas that showed an understanding of the business far beyond her responsibilities as an assistant. "Have you ever thought about doing an MBA?" Ethan asked on impulse during a spreadsheet review. Natasha was silent for a moment too long. "I have, but I don't have the time or money for it." "The company could finance it." "Why?" The question came out sharp, almost defensive. "What's changed, Mr. Winters? For 3 years you barely looked at me. Now suddenly you care about my career." The brutal honesty of the question hit Ethan like a punch. He had no answer, or rather, he had an answer he couldn't give. Not there, not like that, not when there was still so much unsaid between them. "I realized I was wasting your talent," he said finally. And it was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. Natasha stared at him for a long moment, those honey-dark eyes searching for something in his face. Ethan didn't know if she found it, but she nodded slowly and returned to work. That night, Ethan stayed late at the office. The city outside glittered with millions of lit windows, each hiding its own stories, its own regrets. He thought about all the times Natasha had entered his office, spoken to him, worked beside him, while he lived like a ghost, present but not really alive. 3 years. How much time is lost when you live on autopilot? When he finally locked the office and went down to the empty car park, Ethan made a decision. He didn't yet know what he would do with this sudden awakening, with this painful awareness of everything he'd let pass. But he knew he couldn't go back, couldn't pretend that Natasha was still invisible, because now that he saw her, really saw her, he couldn't imagine how he'd survived 3 years blind. Monday arrived laden with dark clouds threatening to break over the city at any moment. Ethan arrived at the office before 7, nervous in a way he hadn't felt since the first days after taking over the company. He'd rehearsed a conversation all night, but all the words seemed inadequate in the light of day. Natasha arrived at 7:45, her hair damp from the drizzle that had begun to fall. She stopped upon seeing Ethan already there, a wrinkle of concern forming between her eyebrows. "Has something happened? We need to talk." Her expression closed immediately. Ethan recognized the posture, tense shoulders, chin raised, prepared for the worst. How many times had she received bad news in her life to react this quickly? "About my performance?" she asked, voice controlled. "No, yes, it's not that." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. "You're excellent at what you do. I just need to understand something." Natasha waited, motionless. "The blue car that picks you up on Tuesdays and Thursdays, is it your boyfriend?" The silence that followed was so dense it seemed solid. Natasha blinked once, twice, processing the question. Then, to Ethan's complete surprise, she laughed. Not the crystalline laugh from the phone, but something more contained, almost bitter. "With all due respect, Mr. Winters, that's none of your business." "I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked." "But you did." Natasha crossed her arms. "And since we're being direct, I'll answer. It's my best friend, Marcus. He helps me with personal matters." The wave of relief that flooded Ethan was so intense it almost made him stagger. But then he saw the expression on Natasha's face. Not anger exactly, but something close to it. "Why does this matter to you?" she asked. "Because," Ethan took a deep breath, "now or never. Because I spent 3 years blind and suddenly woke up, and I can't stop thinking about you." The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back. Natasha became completely still, as if she'd been petrified. The rain began to fall harder outside, drumming against the windows. "You can't say that," she whispered finally. "You're my boss. I need this job. You can't just decide to notice me now. I know it's complicated." Complicated? Natasha took a step back. You think it's just complicated? I've worked here 3 years, Ethan. 3 years being polite, being professional, being invisible because that's what's expected, and now you show up with what? Interest? Guilt? Boredom? The use of his first name was like a slap. Intimate and angry at the same time. It's none of those things. Then what is it? Ethan had no answer. How to explain that something had changed inside him, that a laugh heard by chance had opened a door he didn't even know existed? How to say he'd spent the whole week thinking about her, that he'd slept poorly because he dreamed of conversations they'd never had, that the entire office seemed different now that he truly saw her? I don't know, he admitted. I only know it's real. Natasha shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm leaving early today, I need to think. She left before Ethan could respond, leaving behind only the sound of rain and the faint scent of jasmine. The day passed in slow motion. Ethan cancelled 2 meetings because he couldn't concentrate. He reviewed the same report 6 times without absorbing a single line. Natasha's chair remained empty, a constant reminder of how he'd ruined everything. At 3 in the afternoon, his mobile vibrated with a message from an unknown number. Ethan read the message 10 times. There was hope there, hidden between the careful words. He typed and deleted 5 different responses before finally sending. The response came almost immediately. We'll see. In the following days, Ethan discovered that proving wasn't simple. Natasha returned to work on Tuesday, but there was an invisible wall between them now. She was polite, efficient, impeccable, and completely distant. There were no more humming songs, no more laughs on the phone. It was as if she'd transformed into the perfect professional that Ethan had always treated her as being. And it hurt. It hurt in a way he wasn't prepared to feel. Ethan tried small gestures. He left specialty coffees on her desk. She thanked him formally and let them go cold. He asked about her weekend. She responded in monosyllables. He praised her work. She nodded and changed the subject. She's testing you, said Owen, his business partner and longtime friend, during lunch on Thursday. Wants to see if you give up when things get difficult. I won't give up. Are you sure about that? Owen studied him with perceptive eyes. Because this isn't just any girl, Ethan. She's your employee. Your family will have opinions. The whole company will talk. Are you ready for that? Ethan didn't respond immediately. He thought about his mother, with her specific expectations about who would be the ideal wife for the company heir. He thought about his father, who always preached professionalism above all. He thought about the employees, the looks they'd received, the whispered comments. I don't know if I'm ready, he admitted, but I know I need to try. On Friday, the literal storm that had been forming all week finally exploded. The sky opened in a deluge at 5 in the afternoon, transforming the streets into rivers in minutes. The building's power flickered twice before going out completely. Ethan was in his office when darkness fell. He turned on his phone's torch and went to check the rest of the office. Everyone had left early, except, of course, Natasha, who was trying to save an important file before the computer died. Leave it, Ethan said from the doorway. The emergency generator will kick in a few minutes. Natasha jumped, startled, hand on her chest. In the dim light from her mobile, Ethan saw something on her face. Not anger or distance, but genuine fear. Are you all right? Storms, she said simply. And he remembered an old conversation, a casual comment he hadn't given importance to at the time. Natasha was afraid of thunder. A deafening boom shook the building. Natasha flinched, eyes closing tightly. Before he could think better of it, Ethan crossed the room and took her hand. Come with me. He guided her to his office, which had a smaller window and thicker curtains. They sat on the leather sofa Ethan rarely used, the storm roaring outside, the only light coming from their mobiles. When I was 7, Natasha began in a low voice, my dog ran away during a storm. We searched for days, never found him. She breathed deeply. It's irrational, I know. But every time I hear thunder, I go back to being that 7-year-old girl searching in the soaked garden. Ethan squeezed her hand. It's not irrational, it's human. They stayed like that for long minutes, hands intertwined, the world outside trying to tear itself apart. Gradually, Ethan felt Natasha's fingers relax. She didn't pull her hand away, just stayed there, breathing in the same rhythm as him. "Why me?" Natasha asked suddenly. "Of all the people you could have, why me?" "Because you're real." The answer came out without thought, but it was true. "Because when you laugh on the phone, it's different from the voice you use with me. Because you're afraid of thunder, but pretend to be brave. Because in 3 years, you've never been late, never made a mistake, never complained, but also never let me really know you. And now that I've had a glimpse of who you really are, I can't stop wanting to know more." In the darkness, Ethan heard when Natasha began to cry. They were silent tears at first, then sobs she tried to muffle against her own shoulder. He pulled her close, letting her cry against his chest, one hand stroking her hair. "I was in love with you," she confessed between tears. "From the first day, you didn't even see me, but I was. And it hurt so much, Ethan. It hurt every single day to wake up and come to work and pretend I felt nothing. That's why I built this wall. That's why I created this professional version of myself, because the alternative was to break a little more each day." Ethan felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. "Natasha, and now you show up with these gestures and these words, and I want to believe, but I'm so afraid. Afraid it's temporary. Afraid you'll wake up one day and realize I'm just the assistant again. Afraid of losing not just you, but also my job, my stability, everything I've spent years building. I won't—" "You can't promise that." She pulled away, wiping tears. "No one can. But I need you to understand the risk I'm taking just by considering this. It's not just my heart at stake, it's my entire life." The lights came back on suddenly, fluorescent and harsh after the welcoming darkness. Natasha blinked, disoriented, vulnerable in a way that broke Ethan's heart. Smudged makeup, red eyes, disheveled hair. She'd never looked more beautiful. "Then give me the chance to prove it," Ethan pleaded. "Tell me what you need me to do, anything." Natasha was silent for so long that Ethan thought she was going to refuse, but then she said, "Time. I need time to trust this, and you need to be absolutely certain, because I won't survive if you change your mind." "I'm certain." "Now, yes. But what about when your family finds out, when employees start talking, when this stops being exciting and becomes complicated?" She shook her head. "Give me a month. Let's keep everything professional here. If after a month you still feel the same, we'll talk again." It wasn't what Ethan wanted. He wanted to be able to hold her, kiss her, shout to the world that he'd finally woken up. But looking at Natasha, at the fear and hope battling in her eyes, he understood she was asking for the only reasonable thing. Protection. Against himself, against circumstances, against everything that could go wrong. "A month," he agreed, "but with one condition. Let me get to know you for real. Lunches, conversations, moments where you don't have to be the perfect assistant. As friends, if you prefer. Just let me in." Natasha considered this. The storm outside was beginning to diminish, the thunder moving away. Finally, she nodded. "As friends," she repeated, and there was something almost sad in her voice. But it was a start. The first lunch happened on a Tuesday, at a small Italian restaurant 3 blocks from the office. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, nervous like a teenager on a first date. When Natasha appeared wearing a green dress he'd never seen before, his heart raced. "Hi," she said, and there was shyness in her voice. "Hi." They sat at a table near the window. The waiter brought menus that neither of them really looked at. The silence between them wasn't comfortable. It was loaded with everything they couldn't say, everything they were trying not to feel. "So," Ethan began, "tell me something you'd never tell your boss." Natasha laughed, catching him off guard. It was the real laugh, the one he'd heard on the phone. "That's cheating." "It's strategy." She took a sip of water, thinking, "All right, I hate the font you use in reports. Arial is so personalityless." "Really? What font would you use?" "Garamond or Baskerville. Something with a bit more character." Ethan laughed. "You have strong opinions about fonts." "I have strong opinions about many things." Natasha tilted her head. "I've just never been asked before." The conversation flowed more easily after that. Ethan discovered that Natasha read 3 books a month, that her favorite author was Virginia Woolf, that she had a cat named Fitzgerald. She dreamed of traveling to Ireland, loved documentaries about oceans, was afraid of heights but forced herself to climb tall buildings to overcome the fear. "And you?" Natasha asked when the waiter brought their plates. "What does Ethan Winters do when he's not being the big businessman?" He was speechless for a moment. When was the last time anyone had asked that? "I don't know." "What do you mean you don't know?" "I work, go to the gym, visit my parents on Sundays." Ethan stirred his food. "There's not much more than that." Natasha studied him with perceptive eyes. "Really isn't, or you've forgotten you exist outside the office?" The question hit a nerve. Ethan looked out the window, at the city pulsing with life outside. When had he started living so small? "I had hobbies before," he admitted. "Played piano, read history, liked to walk aimlessly just to get to know the city." He smiled without humor. "I suppose I left all that behind when I took over the company." "It's not too late to reclaim it," Natasha said gently. Something changed in that lunch. A door opened between them. Not the door of romance, but something equally valuable. Friendship, real connection. Ethan felt as if he were getting to know not just Natasha, but also himself again. The lunches became routine, Tuesdays and Thursdays, always at the same Italian restaurant. The owner already knew them, always reserved the table near the window. Natasha talked about her childhood in a small village in Yorkshire, about how she'd saved every penny to move to London and study. Ethan told her about the pressure of carrying a surname that weighed tons, about expectations that had shaped every decision of his life. "Did you never want to do something else?" she asked on a rainy Thursday. "I wanted to be an architect once," Ethan confessed. "Loved drawing buildings, imagining spaces. My father nearly had a heart attack when I told him." "Why?" "Because Winters run companies. They don't build things with their own hands." He laughed bitterly. "Family tradition is a very pretty prison." Natasha reached for his hand across the table, a gesture so natural that neither of them thought before doing it. "It's never too late," she repeated. But life wasn't just pleasant lunches. At the office, maintaining professional distance became exquisite torture. Every time Natasha entered Ethan's office, he had to remember not to look too long. Every time their hands touched when passing documents, an electric current ran through his body. Every time she laughed at something he said, Ethan wanted to pull her close and never let go. And from her eyes, Natasha felt the same. The second week brought complications. Ethan's mother rang on a Wednesday afternoon, her voice melodious, but sharp as always. "Serena Ashford is back in town," she announced. "Remember her? Dr. Ashford's daughter." Ethan vaguely remembered. A pretty girl, well-educated, from a good family. Exactly the type his mother approved of. "I remember. I've organized a dinner for Friday. You'll love catching up with her." It wasn't a request, it never was. Ethan looked through the glass of his office to where Natasha was typing something, forehead furrowed in concentration. The contrast couldn't be clearer. On one side, the easy path his family expected. On the other, something real but impossible, according to all the rules he knew. "Mother, I don't—" 8 o'clock, Ethan. "Don't be late." She hung up before he could protest. Ethan rubbed his face, exhausted. Natasha looked up, noticing something wrong. "Everything all right?" "My mother is doing what she always does." Natasha nodded, understanding without needing explanations. "High society life. I hate it. But you'll go anyway." Ethan didn't respond because she was right. As much as he hated it, as much as he wanted to throw everything away, he still didn't have the courage to confront his family directly. Not about this. Not yet. The dinner was exactly as terrible as Ethan expected. Serena was pleasant enough, spoke 3 languages, had a doctorate in economics, came from an influential family. She ticked all the boxes on his mother's imaginary list, and she was completely wrong. Because when Serena laughed, there were no bells. When she talked about her interests, Ethan pretended to listen, but thought about Natasha describing her passion for photographing sunsets. When Serena touched his arm suggestively, Ethan instinctively recoiled. "You seem distant," she commented between the main course and dessert. Sorry, work. Your mother told me you're very dedicated. Serena leaned closer. But everyone deserves a bit of fun, don't you think? The insinuation was clear. Serena was interested. In another time, Ethan might have considered it. She was exactly the type of woman everyone expected him to choose. But now, after knowing what really mattered, it all seemed empty. When he finally managed to escape the dinner, it was almost midnight. Ethan drove aimlessly, just thinking. The city was quiet, the empty streets reflecting the light from the street lamps. He ended up stopping in front of the building where Natasha lived, a modest block of flats, completely different from the posh neighborhood where he himself lived. He didn't go up, he couldn't. The month hadn't finished yet and he'd promised to respect her space, but he sat there in the car, looking at the dark windows, wondering which one was hers, wondering if she too was awake, thinking of him. His mobile vibrated. Message from Natasha. I know you're down there. I'm at the window on the 3rd floor, second from the left. Ethan looked up. A curtain moved and he saw Natasha's silhouette outlined against the soft light of the flat. She waved. He waved back, heart tight. Another message. How was dinner? There was a long pause. Then, we still have 2 weeks. Ethan closed his eyes, resting his forehead on the steering wheel. It already is. When he opened his eyes again, Natasha was still at the window. She placed her hand on the glass. Ethan placed his hand on the car window, as if they could touch through the distance. They stayed like that for minutes that felt like hours, connected by invisible threads through the night air. Ethan started the car and drove away, but the image of Natasha at the window accompanied him all night. 2 weeks seemed like an eternity, but if she'd asked for time, he would give it, because some things, the best things, were worth any wait. The next morning, Ethan found a small cactus on his desk with a note, So your office has a bit more life, N. He touched the plant carefully, a smile forming. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant, but it meant that Natasha was thinking of him too, also wanted to leave marks of her presence. The last 2 weeks would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt he was fighting for something that really mattered. The 3rd week began with a crisis at the office. An important shipment was held at customs due to bureaucratic problems no one could resolve. Ethan spent 2 days in tense meetings, trying to untangle confusing regulations while the deadline to deliver to the client approached dangerously. It was Natasha who found the solution. I know someone who works in international trade consulting, she mentioned casually during a break between phone calls. We studied together at university. She might know an alternative route. Ethan stared at her. You studied international trade? Business administration with emphasis in international trade. Graduated 2 years ago, studying at night. Natasha said this as if it were insignificant, but Ethan felt shame burn his face. 2 years. She'd graduated 2 years ago and he'd never known, never asked, never given a damn about knowing who really was the person working beside him. Why didn't you ever tell me? Natasha shrugged. You never asked. And frankly, I didn't think it mattered to you. The words hurt precisely because they were true. Ethan had lived 3 years seeing Natasha as a function, not a person, and now he was paying the price for his own blindness. Natasha's friend didn't just help. She saved the entire contract with an elegant solution no one else had thought of. The client was satisfied, the company avoided a huge loss, and Natasha received praise from the entire board. She should have a better position here, Owen said to Ethan after the crisis meeting. She's wasted as an assistant. I know. Then do something about it. Ethan spent the night drafting a proposal. The next morning he called Natasha for a private meeting. I want to offer you a promotion, he said directly. International business analyst, triple salary, your own office, participation in all strategic decisions. Natasha became completely still. Why? Because you deserve it. Because you're brilliant and wasted in your current position. And it has nothing to do with us. Ethan took a deep breath. It would be a lie to say it doesn't. But even if there was nothing between us, you'd still deserve this. The difference is that now I'm paying enough attention to see the obvious. Natasha stood, walking to the window. The city stretched outside, full of possibilities and traps. If I accept, everyone will talk. They'll say I only got it because you're interested in me. Let them talk. You'll prove they're wrong. And if I don't want to have to prove anything, if I don't want every achievement of mine to be tainted with suspicion. She turned to face him. You don't understand, Ethan. For you, it's romantic to defy the rules. For me, it's my reputation at stake, my credibility, everything I've worked for. The force of the reaction caught Ethan off guard, but looking at Natasha, at the anger and fear competing in her eyes, he began to understand. For him, this was about following his heart. For her, it was about survival. Then tell me what to do, Ethan asked. How do we do this the right way? Natasha was silent for a long moment. Let me think. But don't announce anything yet. Please. That afternoon, Ethan received an unexpected call. It was Marcus, Natasha's best friend. We need to talk, his voice was serious, about Tash. They met at a cafe in the late afternoon. Marcus was exactly as Ethan had imagined, relaxed, protective, with eyes that evaluated everything. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. Tash told me about you two, or about whatever this is. And you're here to warn me to stay away. I'm here to understand your intentions. Marcus leaned forward. She's been through a lot, mate. Abusive relationship that nearly destroyed her, family that didn't support her dreams, years working double to prove she deserves to be where she is. And now you appear the perfect boss with your romantic gestures, and she's confused and vulnerable and has been in love for years. Ethan felt his stomach clench. Abusive relationship? She didn't tell you? Marcus sighed. Of course not. Tash keeps her wounds well hidden. He took a sip of coffee. Her ex-boyfriend was controlling, isolated her from friends, made her feel small, inadequate. It took 2 years for her to gather the courage to leave. That's why she's so cautious now. That's why she needs absolute certainty before risking herself again. The pieces began to fall into place. Natasha's hesitation, the fear in her eyes, the need for protection. It wasn't just about the difference in positions or what people would say. It was about scars that hadn't completely healed yet. I would never hurt her, Ethan said, voice hoarse. You already have. 3 years being invisible to her. Marcus didn't say this with cruelty, just with facts. The question is, will you hurt her again when things get difficult? When your family pressures? When employees whisper? When she's no longer an exciting novelty but just a real person with flaws and bad days? No. Then prove it. To her and to yourself. Marcus stood to leave but stopped. One last thing. Natasha is strong but not indestructible. If you're not absolutely certain, it's better to stop now before causing irreparable damage. Ethan sat in the cafe for another hour after Marcus left, the words echoing in his mind. Was he really ready for this? For all the weight that came with loving Natasha, not the fantasy he'd created, but the real, complete, complicated person? The answer came more easily than expected. Yes, 1,000 times yes. But he needed to show it in a way she could believe. In the following days, Ethan changed his approach. He stopped with the grand gestures and focused on the small things, remembering how Natasha liked her coffee, noticing when she was stressed and suggesting breaks, defending her ideas in meetings without giving himself credit. He began to treat her as he would treat a true partner, not someone he was trying to impress. And Natasha noticed. You're different, she commented during lunch. 4 days remained until the month ended. How so? Less intense, more present. Natasha stirred her salad. I like it this way. Marcus talked to me, Ethan confessed, made me realize I was focusing on the wrong things. You don't need grand gestures, you need consistency. He had no right to... He had every right. He's your best friend, he's protecting you. Ethan reached for her hand across the table, and he helped me better understand what you need from me. Natasha looked at their intertwined hands. You know what's funny? I spent 3 years wishing you'd see me, and now that you do, I'm afraid of what comes next. What are you afraid of specifically? She took a deep breath. That this will change you, that the pressure from your family, the employees, society, will make you give up, that you'll realize I'm too much work, that I'm not enough to compensate for all the complications. Ethan squeezed her hand. You are enough, more than enough, and yes, there will be pressure and complications. But Natasha, look at me. He waited until she raised her eyes. I'm not looking for perfection or ease. I'm looking for real, and you're the most real person I've ever met. Tears glistened in Natasha's eyes, but she blinked them away. 4 days. 4 days. And then? And then we start pretending this is just friendship. On Thursday, 2 days before the deadline, Ethan's mother appeared at the office without warning. Natasha received her with impeccable professionalism, offered tea, settled her in the waiting room. But when she came to notify Ethan, there was tension on her face. Your mother is here. I know, thank you. His mother, Margaret Winters, was an elegant woman in her early 50s, with perfectly coiffed hair and a gaze that missed nothing. She analyzed Ethan's office with critical eyes before sitting. Your assistant is very pretty, she said casually. Ethan felt alarm. Mother, why are you here? Can't I visit my son? But then her face became serious. Serena rang me, said you seemed distant during dinner, that you seemed to be thinking of someone else. And she's right. Margaret sighed. Ethan, please tell me it's not who I think it is. Depends on who you think. Your assistant, Natasha. His mother said the name as if it were something distasteful. I saw how you looked at each other, how she blushed when you passed by her. Ethan closed his eyes, knowing the moment had arrived. And if it is, then you're making a terrible mistake. Margaret stood, walking to the window. You know the expectations placed on you, the legacy you need to preserve. An assistant, Ethan? Really? She's not just an assistant. She has a degree in business administration, saved our biggest contract this month, has ideas worth gold. Her CV doesn't matter. What matters is where she comes from, who her people are, whether she fits into our circle. Margaret turned to him. And frankly, what matters is what people will say when the Winters heir marries his employee. Marry? Ethan blinked. Mother, we're just... Oh, please, I know that look. It's the same your father had when he met me. Her expression softened slightly. And yes, I know the irony, but at least I came from a respectable family, had proper education. This is asking to be destroyed. Ethan felt anger rise. Or maybe it's time to change what it means to be a Winters. Margaret was silent for a long moment. Then, to Ethan's complete surprise, she laughed, not with humor, but with something that seemed like recognition. You're exactly like your father. Stubborn, idealistic, impossible to dissuade when you've decided something. She picked up her handbag. I just hope you're prepared for the consequences. When she left, she passed Natasha without saying a word, but the look they exchanged, quick but loaded, said everything. The battle was only beginning. Natasha entered Ethan's office minutes later, face pale. I heard part of the conversation. The walls are thin. Natasha, she's right, you know, about the consequences, about what people will say. I don't care what people will say, but I care. Her voice rose for the first time. Because I'm the one they'll judge. I'm the one they'll call a gold digger, an opportunist, 1,000 other things. You'll be seen as the guy who fell in love. I'll be the tart who seduced the boss. Ethan crossed the room, holding her shoulders. Don't care about what they say. Care about what we know is true. Easy for you to say, she whispered. You don't know what it's like to be judged your whole life. To always be the one who's not good enough, smart enough, worthy enough. Then teach me. Show me what it's like. Help me understand. Ethan held her face in his hands. But don't give up on us before we've even started. Natasha closed her eyes, tears escaping. Ethan wiped them with his thumbs, heart breaking at seeing so much pain in her. 2 days, she said finally. We still have 2 days, and then we decide if this is worth the battle. Ethan kissed her forehead, a gentle gesture full of promise. It will be worth it. I promise it will be worth it. But as he held her, as he felt her trembling in his arms, Ethan knew words weren't enough. He would have to prove it, would have to be willing to sacrifice things, face his family, defy the world if necessary. The question was he really ready for that? 2 days remained to find out. The last day of the month arrived on a rainy Friday in November. Ethan woke at 5 in the morning, unable to sleep, stomach churning with nervousness. At 8 o'clock he had to be at the office for an important meeting with the company's board, including his father and 2 uncles who were minority shareholders, but the only thing he could think about was Natasha. At 7:30 he was sitting in his car in front of her building, as he'd done that night weeks ago. This time he sent a message first. "I'm down here. Can we talk?" The response came almost immediately. "Get out of the car and come up. Flat 32. Ethan's heart raced as he climbed the 3 flights of stairs. The building was old but well maintained, with potted plants in the corridors and the smell of coffee coming from some flat. When he reached flat 32, Natasha was already waiting. She wore a simple dressing gown over pajamas, hair loose falling over her shoulders, no makeup. It was the first time Ethan had seen her like this, completely natural, vulnerable, real, and she was absolutely beautiful. "Come in," she said quietly. The flat was small but cozy, books piled on every available surface, plants in colourful pots on the windowsills, photos of smiling people on the walls. It was the kind of place that told a story about who lived there, someone who valued knowledge, simple beauty, real connections. "Tea?" Natasha offered, and there was nervousness in her voice that mirrored his. "Please." They sat on the small living room sofa, warm mugs in their hands, silence weighing between them. Outside, the rain drummed against the windows, creating a cocoon of intimacy. "The month is over," Natasha said finally. "It is. Do you still feel the same?" Ethan put his mug aside and turned to face her completely. "I feel more. Every day I spend getting to know you, every conversation, every moment, I fall more in love. It's not just attraction, Natasha. It's admiration, respect, genuine connection. It's you challenging my ideas, making me laugh, showing me there's life beyond work. It's—" He took a deep breath. "It's everything." Tears ran down Natasha's face without her trying to hide them. "Me too. I never stopped feeling from day one. But Ethan, I'm so afraid." "Of what?" "Of everything." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "Of losing my job if this goes wrong. Of being humiliated if people find out and judge. Of your family hating me. Of you waking up one day and realizing I'm not worth the headache." Ethan held her hands. "I can't promise it will be easy. We'll face judgments, comments, resistance. My family will protest. Employees will talk. Some doors will close." "Then why do this?" "Because some things are worth fighting for, and you, us, are one of them." Ethan caressed her face. "Natasha, I spent 3 years dead inside, just going through the motions. You woke me up, made me feel again. And yes, it's scary and complicated, and will demand more of me than any business or business decision ever has. But the alternative is going back to being that empty man, and I refuse. I refuse to live like that when I know there's something better. And if I'm not strong enough for this? You're the strongest person I know. You survived an abusive relationship, worked and studied simultaneously, built a life alone, coming from nowhere. Don't tell me you're not strong enough." He kissed her forehead. "But you don't have to be strong alone. We'll face this together." Natasha was silent for so long that Ethan thought she was going to refuse, but then she whispered, "Together." "Together?" "Yes, together." She looked at him with shining eyes. "But with some conditions." "Anything. First, the promotion you offered, I'll accept it. But I want to go through an independent evaluation process first. Someone from outside the company to confirm I deserve the position. I don't want anyone, including myself, to be able to question whether I earned it on merit." Ethan nodded. "Done." "Second, we keep this private at first. Not hidden, but private. Want to do things right? Then let's give people time to get to know me in the new position before adding the complication of our relationship." "For how long?" 3 months. Enough time for me to prove my worth professionally." Ethan wanted to protest. 3 months seemed like an eternity, but looking at the determination on Natasha's face, he understood. It was about protecting her. giving her solid ground before the storm. 3 months, he agreed. And third, Natasha hesitated. Third, you need to have that conversation with your family, for real, not just reacting when they confront you, but sitting down with them and explaining, if we're going to do this, I need to know you're willing to face them. I will, today. Today? I have a board meeting in an hour. I'll talk to my father afterwards. Ethan smiled without humor. No time like the present. Natasha pulled him close, resting her head on his shoulder. Ethan wrapped her in his arms, breathing in the jasmine scent he now knew so well. They stayed like that while the rain fell and the tea cooled, 2 hearts beating in sync, ready to face whatever came. Ethan, Natasha whispered against his neck. Yes? Kiss me. Properly this time. And he kissed her. It wasn't like the hurried kisses from before, loaded with urgency and uncertainty. It was slow, deep, a promise sealed with lips and shared breaths. It was everything Ethan had imagined and more, because it tasted of tea and tears and hope. When they finally pulled apart, both were trembling. I love you, Ethan said, the words escaping before he could think. I know it's too soon, that it's scary to say this, but it's true. I love you, Natasha. She smiled through tears. I love you too, for 3 damn years. They laughed together, a sound of relief and joy mixed. And as Ethan held her, as for the first time he allowed himself to fully feel the enormity of what he felt, he knew he'd made the right decision. From then on, everything would change, but at least they'd change together. The board meeting was tense and long. Financial reports, discussions about expansion, debates about market strategies. Ethan participated mechanically, his mind partly still in Natasha's flat, on the taste of her lips, on the way she'd said, together. When the meeting ended and the other members began to leave, Ethan asked his father to stay. Richard Winters was 62 and looked every day of it, completely grey hair, deep wrinkles around his eyes, but still with that commanding presence that had always intimidated Ethan as a child. We need to talk, Ethan began. Your mother told me about the girl, Richard said immediately. The assistant. Natasha. Her name is Natasha. Yes, Natasha. Richard sighed, sitting heavily. Ethan, you know I respect your decisions. But this... I love her, Dad. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard looked at his son for a long moment, evaluating, considering. Finally, he asked, Why? The simplicity of the question caught Ethan off guard. Why? Yes. Why her specifically? What makes her so special that you're willing to face all this? Ethan thought about all the possible answers, her intelligence, beauty, strength, but it was the simple truth that came out. Because she makes me want to be better. Not from obligation or expectation, but because when I'm with her, I see possibilities I never considered. She challenges me, questions me, shows me there are other ways to live beyond the one I've always known. And when I look to the future, I can't imagine it without her. Richard was silent for so long that Ethan thought he was going to explode. But then, to his complete surprise, his father laughed, not with humor, but with something that seemed like recognition. Do you know how I met your mother? Richard asked. Ethan blinked. At the country club, you've told that story millions of times. That's the version we tell in public. The truth. Richard leaned back. I met Margaret on the tube. She was coming back from work. She was a secretary at a law firm. I was there because my car broke down and I needed to get to a meeting. She caught my attention because she was reading a philosophy book on a packed train, completely oblivious to the chaos around her. Ethan had never heard this story. But you always said that we met in appropriate social circles, yes, because my family would have died of shame if they'd known the truth. Your grandmother didn't speak to your mother for the first 5 years of our marriage. Richard looked out the window. It was the hardest war I ever fought, but it was worth every moment because Margaret is my true partner, not just a pretty decoration at dinners, but someone who challenges me, completes me, makes me want to be better. Ethan felt as if the ground had moved beneath his feet. Does Mum know you're telling me this? It was her suggestion, said I needed to show you I'm not the hypocrite I seem to be. Richard smiled sadly. Your grandfather made me promise you'd have an easier path, that you wouldn't have to fight like I fought. That's why we were so careful with your upbringing, so focused on keeping you in the right circles. But I think in the process, we forgot to teach you the most important part. Which is that some battles are worth fighting, that tradition without heart is just empty ritual, that in the end, what matters isn't what others think, but who you go home to every night. Richard stood, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. If you love this girl, Natasha, truly, then fight for her, but be prepared, it won't be easy. I know. And Ethan? His father stopped at the door. Do better than I did. Don't let your mother face 5 years of silence and humiliation from the family. Defend your choice from the start. Be the man I took too long to be. When Richard left, Ethan sat in the empty meeting room, processing everything. His family was more complicated than he'd ever imagined. His father had carried secrets. His mother had survived battles he'd never known about. And now it was his turn to fight. That night, Ethan had dinner with his parents. The tension was palpable when they sat at the table, but it was his mother who broke the silence. Your father told me you talked. He did. Margaret looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. She sighed. I was hard on you about Natasha, and unfair, because I saw in her everything I was, young, without connections, vulnerable, and I remembered how difficult it was for me. The doors that closed, the nasty comments, the judging looks. She paused, eyes glistening. I wanted to protect you from that, protect her from that. But I think what I was really doing was projecting my own fear. Mum, let me finish. Margaret raised her hand. If you really love her, if you're willing to face everything that comes with it, then you have my support. But I need to know you're doing this for the right reasons. Not for rebellion, not for temporary passion, but for true love. Ethan thought about Natasha, about the lunches where they'd talked for hours, about the small revelations that brought her to life, about the way she challenged him to be better. He thought about how her flat felt like a real home, full of personality and warmth. He thought about how he felt complete when he was with her, as if a piece that had always been missing finally fit. It's true love, he said with conviction, the kind that changes everything. Margaret and Richard exchanged a long look, a silent communication that only decades of marriage allow. Finally, Margaret nodded. Then bring her for dinner. I want to meet her properly. Not as the assistant, but as the woman you love. Ethan felt as if an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. It wouldn't be easy. There would still be other family members to face, employees to manage, society to defy. But having his parents' support was a crucial start. Thank you, he said, voice thick. Don't thank us yet, Richard warned. Prepare her and prepare yourself. The storm is only beginning. But Ethan didn't care, because for the first time in his life, he felt he was fighting for the right thing. And with Natasha by his side, he felt he could face any storm. On Monday morning, Natasha arrived at the office to find an envelope on her desk. Inside, a contract for the new position, International Business Analyst, along with the name and contact of the independent consultant who would conduct her evaluation. There was also a handwritten note, first step, together, E. Natasha held the paper against her chest, smiling through tears. It was real. It was really happening. And yes, it would be difficult. There would be obstacles, judgments, moments when she'd question if she'd made the right choice. But looking through the glass to Ethan's office, seeing him already working with that intense concentration she'd learned to love, Natasha knew some risks were worth taking. 3 years waiting, 3 months proving her worth. And after that, the whole world would know that Natasha Cole wasn't just the assistant who fell in love with her boss. She was the woman who fought for her place, who earned her position through hard work and genuine talent, who deserved to be where she was, and who loved Ethan Winters not despite all the complications, but with full awareness of them, because some stories don't follow the expected script, and sometimes the best stories are exactly those. The following 3 months were simultaneously the most exciting and most challenging of Natasha's life. The independent evaluation came first. 2 intense days of tests, interviews, case analyses. The consultant, an austere 60-year-old man called Dr. Morrison, gave no indication of his impressions during the process. When the report finally arrived, Natasha was so nervous she could barely open the envelope. But there it was, in black and white. The candidate demonstrates exceptional knowledge in international trade, advanced strategic thinking, and analytical skills that exceed the position's requirements. Recommendation: approval without reservations. Ethan found her in the corridor shortly after, smiling in a way that made her heart race. But they maintained professional distance, just a firm, formal handshake. "Congratulations, Ms. Cole. Welcome to the executive team." "Thank you, Mr. Winters." But their eyes said everything the words couldn't. The new position came with its own office, smaller than Ethan's, but with a view of the city. Natasha spent the first day organizing, bringing some plants from home, hanging a painting Marcus had given her as a gift. When she finally sat in her new chair, the weight of the moment hit her. She'd done it on her own merit, no one could take that from her. But the looks started almost immediately. Employees whispering when she passed, smiles that didn't reach the eyes, questions about how exactly she'd gotten the promotion so quickly. Natasha kept her head high, responded with icy professionalism, and worked twice as hard to prove she deserved to be there. "Ignore them," Owen advised in a strategy meeting. He was one of the few who'd treated her with genuine respect from the start. "Envy always speaks louder at first. Let your work silence the mouths." And that's what Natasha did. She threw herself into projects with fierce determination, identified market opportunities no one else saw, developed relationships with international partners using her language skills. She spoke fluent Spanish and business English, something Ethan discovered only when he heard her in a video conference with suppliers from Colombia. "You speak Spanish?" he asked afterwards, genuinely surprised. "And you didn't know?" Natasha arched an eyebrow. "It's on my CV." Ethan had the decency to look embarrassed. How many other things didn't he know about her? The answer was many. But he was learning, day by day, small revelations that made her increasingly fascinating. Keeping the relationship private was exquisite torture. Meetings where they needed to debate ideas professionally, while all they wanted was to touch each other. Business lunches where Natasha laughed at something Ethan said, and he had to remember not to look for too long. Lift conversations that ended abruptly when someone entered. But the nights were theirs. Ethan began visiting Natasha's flat regularly. They'd have dinner together. She cooked simple but delicious dishes. He brought wine and desserts. They watched old films Natasha loved, she explaining the cinematic references, while he just watched her face light up when talking about her passion. "You should have been a film critic," Ethan commented one night. "And you should have been an architect," she retorted, pointing to the doodles he'd made while waiting for her to prepare dinner. Intricate drawings of imaginary buildings. They talked about everything. Childhood so different, his of privilege and expectation, hers of struggle and determination, old dreams they'd abandoned along the way, fears they carried hidden. Natasha told him about her abusive ex-boyfriend, the scars that hadn't completely healed yet. Ethan talked about the pressure of carrying a surname, of never feeling he was good enough. "You're more than good enough," Natasha said, holding his face. "You're extraordinary. You just need to see it. And you're the strongest person I know, you just need to believe it." They were mirrors for each other, reflecting truths they couldn't see alone. At work, their professional relationship evolved into true partnership. Natasha had an ability to see angles Ethan missed, to think outside established patterns. In a crucial meeting about expansion into Asian markets, it was she who identified a logistics problem that would have cost millions if it had gone unnoticed. "How did you spot that?" Ethan asked afterwards, genuinely impressed. "Because I look at things differently. You were raised in this business world, it's intuitive for you. I had to learn every detail from scratch, so I pay attention to things you take for granted." The diversity of perspective made them formidable together, and others began to notice. In the second month, an important client came to visit. During the tour of the company, he stopped at Natasha's office. "You're new here." It wasn't a question. 3 months, Natasha confirmed, keeping her voice steady. "And you already have your own office. Impressive." There was something calculating in his gaze. "Must be very good at what you do." or know the right people. The implication was clear and offensive. Natasha felt anger boil but kept her expression neutral. I'm good at what I do. My evaluation report is publicly available if you'd like to review it. The client laughed, but it was an unpleasant sound. Defensive, interesting. Confident, she corrected. There's a difference. Ethan, who was accompanying the tour, intervened smoothly. Natasha was instrumental in closing our last international contract. Perhaps you'd like to see the figures. It was a discreet but effective defense. The client changed the subject, but Natasha saw the look Ethan gave her. Concern mixed with admiration for how she'd maintained her composure. That night in her flat, Ethan found her quiet, distant. What he said affected you. It wasn't a question. It's not him specifically. It's that this won't stop, will it? Even after the 3 months, even after I've proved my worth 1,000 times, there'll always be someone who says I'm only here because... She didn't finish the sentence. Ethan pulled her close. Because you love me, and I love you. Yes, there'll always be people who'll say that. But Natasha, look at what you've built in just 2 months. The contracts you've closed, the strategies you've developed, the respect you've earned. That's real and documented. The gossip will wither when confronted with concrete facts. And if it doesn't wither, then we keep proving them wrong, together. He kissed her forehead. And if it eventually becomes just background noise that doesn't matter? Natasha wanted to believe. Some days were easier than others. The biggest test came in the 3rd month. An important project, expanding operations to Ireland, needed someone to lead it. It was a high-visibility position that could define careers. When Ethan proposed Natasha for the role during an executive meeting, there were immediate objections. She's too new, said one of Ethan's uncles, Gerald. Doesn't have enough experience for something of this magnitude. She has exactly the experience we need, Ethan counter-argued. Knowledge of the Irish market, connections she developed through her academic research, cultural understanding, and it's convenient that you're proposing her, Gerald interrupted. We all know there's closeness between you. The silence that followed was absolute. This was the moment both knew would eventually come. The direct accusation, the elephant in the room finally being named. Natasha, sitting on the other side of the table, kept her face neutral, even feeling all eyes on her. Ethan also remained calm. If you're insinuating favoritism, Gerald, I can provide analysis of Natasha's results from the last 3 months, Owen intervened. They speak for themselves. She exceeded targets by 40%, developed 3 new revenue streams, and saved that customs disaster that would have cost us $500,000. Still, and if the closeness is the real problem, Ethan said, voice firm but controlled, perhaps we should discuss this directly instead of using a business project as a pretext. Gerald went red. Other board members exchanged uncomfortable looks. It was Richard, Ethan's father, who broke the tension. My son is right. There are clearly issues unrelated to professional merit at play here. I suggest we postpone the decision about the Ireland project and schedule a separate discussion about relationship policies in the company. It was a diplomatic exit that gave time, but it was also an acknowledgement that they could no longer ignore the truth. When the meeting ended, Natasha went straight to the toilets. She locked herself in a cubicle and let tears of anger and frustration fall. She'd worked so hard, proved her worth repeatedly, but it still wasn't enough. The toilet door opened. Footsteps. Then the voice of an older employee, Carmen, who'd always been cordial but distant. Natasha, I know you're in there. Natasha wiped her face and came out of the cubicle. Carmen was leaning against the sink, expression understanding. That was unfair to you, Carmen said simply. What Gerald did there. It's reality. It shouldn't be. Carmen sighed. Look, I've worked here 20 years, seen a lot, and I can tell you with absolute certainty, you deserve to be in that room, deserve to lead that project. If anyone questions it, the problem is theirs, not yours. The kind words broke something in Natasha. New tears fell, but different this time. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep doing your brilliant work. Eventually, even the Geralds of the world will have to admit the truth. That night, Ethan went to Natasha's flat without warning. She opened the door with eyes still swollen from crying. "It's not over yet," she said before he could speak. "We still have a week." "I know, but I couldn't leave you alone after that." Ethan entered, closing the door. "Natasha, I'm sorry. I should have anticipated, prepared you better." "It's not your fault. It's the reality of choosing this." She sat on the sofa, looking small and tired. "But Ethan, I need to know, will it always be like this? Every achievement questioned, every position debated, every project treated as favoritism?" Ethan sat beside her, holding her hands. "Honestly, probably yes for a while, until it becomes so obvious that it's ridiculous to question, and even after, there'll always be a Gerald or two who can't accept it." He lifted her chin so she'd look at him. "But listen to this. You're going to lead that island project, not because I want you to lead it, but because objectively, you're the best person for it, and I'll make sure it's judged fairly." "How?" "I'll remove myself from the decision. I'll ask my father and Owen to do a blind analysis of the candidates, your qualifications versus other potential project leaders. No names, just competencies. And when you win, it'll be indisputable." Natasha studied his face. "And if I don't win?" "Then you didn't win on merit, and we'll find another project where your skills fit better." "But Natasha," he smiled, "you're going to win, because you really are the best." A week later, Richard and Owen presented their analysis. Of the 5 candidacies considered, Natasha scored highest in all relevant metrics. The project was hers. Gerald said nothing during the announcement, but his sullen silence was reluctant acceptance. That night, for the first time in 3 months, Ethan took Natasha to dinner at a public restaurant. Still discreet, still private, but a step towards making real what was between them. "4 days, Natasha said between starters. 4 days left." "You've been counting?" "Since day 1 of the 3 months, she smiled. "Can't wait to stop pretending you're just my colleague." "And what am I?" Natasha looked at him with shining eyes. "My partner, in everything." 4 days remained until the world would know what they'd known for months, that Ethan Winters and Natasha Cole were more than work colleagues. They were partners, lovers, 2 people who'd found in each other something they didn't even know they were looking for. Ethan paid the bill and they went out into the cold February night. The city glittered around them, full of life and movement. For the first time, they walked side by side without fear of who might see, fingers intertwining naturally. "Scared?" Ethan asked. "Terrified," Natasha admitted, "but also relieved. Tired of hiding." "Me too." They stopped on an old bridge crossing the Thames. The water reflected the city lights, creating a trembling mirror of colors. Natasha leaned on the parapet, watching the movement below. "I've changed so much these 3 months," she said thoughtfully. "Not just professionally, as a person. I learned I can defend my space, that my voice matters, that I deserve to be in any room where I find myself. You always deserved it. You just needed to believe it." "And you helped me believe." She turned to him. "You know what's funny? I spent 3 years idealizing you, built a version of you in my head, perfect, unreachable, and then I got to know you for real, discovered your flaws, your insecurities, your fears, and I love you even more for it, because you're real." Ethan pulled her close, kissing her under the starry sky, indifferent to the passers-by, and for the first time, he didn't care who saw. The 4 days passed in a whirlwind. Natasha threw herself into preparations for the island project, working late every night. Ethan finalized important agreements, prepared his family for the announcement to come, rehearsed 1,000 versions of the conversation he'd have with the employees. The night before the 3-month deadline ended, neither could sleep. Ethan spent the night at Natasha's flat, talking about everything and nothing, planning how they'd reveal the truth. "Keep it simple," Natasha suggested. "No grand declarations, just honesty." "Honesty," Ethan agreed. On Monday morning, they arrived at the office together for the first time. A few curious looks followed them when they entered side by side, but no one said anything. Yet. At 10 in the morning, Ethan called a general meeting. All employees, from intern to director, gathered in the main hall. The buzz of curiosity was palpable. Unannounced general meetings usually meant important news. Ethan went up to the small stage, Natasha by his side. She seemed calm externally, but he could see her hands trembling slightly. He took one, intertwining fingers, and the entire hall fell silent. "Thank you for coming," Ethan began. "I know surprise meetings cause anxiety, so I'll get straight to the point. You deserve to know the truth about something that's been a source of speculation." He could see people leaning forward, attentive. "Natasha Cole and I are in a relationship. Serious, committed, real." Pause. "I know this raises questions about professionalism and favoritism, so I'm going to address that right now. Natasha earned her position through merit, proven by independent evaluation. Her results from the last 3 months are available for anyone's review. She's leading the Ireland project because she's objectively the most qualified, according to blind analysis conducted by our board." Natasha took a step forward. Her voice was firm when she spoke. "I understand this is complicated, that some of you will question my achievements, attribute them to the relationship instead of work. All I can say is, judge me by results. Hold me to the same standards you'd hold anyone else, and if at any point I'm not performing, I want to know." There was silence for a moment that seemed eternal. Then Carmen from accounting began to applaud. Others joined, not all, but enough. It was hesitant acceptance, but it was a start. After the meeting, some employees congratulated discreetly. Others avoided looking directly. Gerald, Ethan's uncle, left without a word, but the truth was exposed, and there was something liberating about it. "We survived," Natasha whispered, when they returned to their offices. "We survived the first round," Ethan corrected, "but yes, we survived." That afternoon they had lunch together at the same Italian restaurant where it had all begun months ago, but this time they sat on the same side of the table, hands intertwined on the tablecloth, not hiding. "How do you feel?" Ethan asked. "Exposed, vulnerable, scared?" Natasha smiled. "And incredibly free." The following weeks brought adjustments. Some employees gradually warmed to the idea of Ethan and Natasha as a couple. Others remained distant, skeptical. But work continued, and results spoke for themselves. The Ireland project required travel. Natasha spent 2 weeks in Dublin, negotiating with local partners, establishing operations, proving she deserved the trust placed in her. Ethan stayed in Britain, managing daily operations and terribly missing her. They talked every night by video call. Natasha showed the city she was learning to love. Cobbled streets, Georgian doors painted bright colors, Guinness in century-old pubs. "You need to see this in person," she said, eyes shining. "Soon," Ethan promised. But the distance brought clarity. Ethan realized how much Natasha had become an essential part of his life, not just as a girlfriend, but as a partner in every sense. He made decisions asking himself what she'd think, saw opportunities through her eyes, felt like half a person without her presence. When Natasha finally returned, tanned from Irish sun and radiant with success, Ethan picked her up at the airport with a bouquet of Irish roses he'd specially imported. "Over the top," she laughed, but her eyes shone with joy. "Impossible to be over the top when it comes to you." In the car returning to the city, Natasha told him about the negotiations, challenges overcome, alliances formed. She'd closed deals that would solidify the company's presence in Ireland for the next 5 years. It was an undeniable victory. "The board will have to recognize this," Ethan said proudly. "They already have. Your father rang me yesterday to personally congratulate me." "Really?" Said I remind him of your mother when she was young, determined, brilliant, refusing to accept limitations imposed by others. Natasha smiled. "It was the biggest compliment I've ever received." Life found a new rhythm. Work during the day where they maintained professionalism but no longer hid the relationship. Dinners with Natasha's friends, Marcus and his eclectic group who adored Ethan once they got over initial distrust. Regular visits to the Winters family, where Margaret slowly warmed to Natasha. "She asked me about cooking today," Natasha reported after a Sunday at the Winters mansion. "I think it's her version of building bridges." "My mother expresses affection through recipes," Ethan confirmed. "It's progress." But not everything was easy victories. There was an incident at a company gala. A business partner's wife, clearly intoxicated, made nasty comments about secretaries who do well for themselves. Natasha maintained composure, but Ethan saw the pain in her eyes. He intercepted politely but firmly. Natasha is our Director of International Business Operations, responsible for our most successful expansion in years. And she's my girlfriend. I suggest you choose your words more carefully. The woman went red and walked away, but the damage was done. Another reminder that some would always see Natasha through prejudiced lenses. It won't stop, will it? Natasha said in the car going home, tears finally falling. Eventually it'll diminish, as your achievements pile up, as you become undeniable. And if I get tired before that? Of having to prove my worth repeatedly while everyone else just exists? Ethan had no easy answer, just held her hand and drove in silence, letting her process the frustration. That night, Ethan made a decision. The next morning he announced he was establishing new anti-discrimination policies in the company. Mandatory training on unconscious bias, anonymous channel to report inappropriate comments, clear consequences for those who violated the rules. You don't need to do this for me, Natasha said when she found out. It's not just for you. It's what we should have done years ago. You just opened my eyes to the need. The changes provoked resistance from some older employees. Gerald even complained that the company was giving in to political correctness. But Richard supported Ethan completely, and the policies were implemented. Natasha watched everything with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. She didn't want to be the reason for divisions in the company. Ethan had to remind her repeatedly, necessary changes always cause discomfort, but they're necessary precisely because of that. In the midst of all the turbulence, something beautiful was happening. Natasha and Ethan developed their own rhythm as a couple. They discovered she was a morning person while he came alive at night, that she needed silence to process emotions while he needed to talk. That arguments were inevitable but could be resolved with honesty. The first serious argument came when Ethan made an important decision about the island project without consulting Natasha. She was the project leader, but he'd gone over her head to speed up an approval. "You disrespected me," she said, voice trembling with controlled anger. "I was trying to help. Helping would be consulting me. That was diminishing me." Natasha crossed her arms. "You did exactly what everyone expects, treated me differently because we're a couple, and not in a way that favors me, but that weakens me." Ethan felt the weight of the accusation. She was right. In a well-intentioned attempt to protect, he'd undermined her authority. "You're right. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "Words are easy, Ethan. I need to see change." And he changed. Learned to separate Ethan the boyfriend from Ethan the business partner, to respect Natasha's autonomy in professional decisions even when he disagreed, to trust her judgment. It was difficult. His protective instincts fought with the need to treat her as an equal. But he learned, stumbling sometimes, but always correcting himself. 6 months after making the relationship public, Natasha was invited to speak at an international business conference. It was significant recognition. Speakers were established leaders in the field, not recent promotions like her. "They'll say they only invited you because of the Winters name," Ethan warned. "Probably." Natasha smiled. "And I'll prove them wrong with a talk so good they can't deny it." And that's exactly what she did. Ethan watched from the audience as Natasha commanded the stage, speaking confidently about international expansion strategies, answering difficult questions with grace and expertise. When she finished, the ovation was genuine. Afterwards, a CEO from a competing company approached her. "Impressive presentation. Your company is lucky to have you." "Thank you," Natasha responded graciously. "Would you consider changing companies? We'd pay generously for someone with your talent." It was Ethan who went pale at the possibility, but Natasha just laughed and politely declined. Later, she explained, "I've built something there. I'm not going to abandon it just because it gets difficult sometimes." And if it wasn't about being difficult? What if it was simply a better opportunity? Natasha looked at him with serious eyes. "Do you want me to go?" "No, but I also don't want you to stay just because of me. Your career needs to be about you, not about us." "It is about me. And part of me building my career is building it in a place where I have autonomy, respect, and yes, a partner who understands my ambitions. That's not weakness, Ethan. It's choosing where I want to plant roots." The conversation forced them to confront a question they'd been avoiding: long-term future. They talked in terms of months, sometimes even weeks. But what about years? Decades? One night, lying on the sofa in Natasha's flat, she asked, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" Ethan thought. Expanding the company, maybe opening offices in more countries, consolidating the family legacy, but also innovating. He paused. "And by your side?" "And in 10? "Same answer. Company growing, you by my side. Maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe. Maybe married. Maybe with children, if that's what you want." Natasha was quiet for so long that Ethan got nervous. Then she said, "Yes." "Yes?" "Yes, that's what I want. Not now, we have time, but eventually." She turned to look at him. "Are you proposing?" "Not officially, not yet." Ethan kissed her gently. "But when I do propose, you'll know, because it'll be unforgettable." The 8th month brought a new crisis, but this time not professional. Natasha's father, from whom she'd been estranged for years, had a heart attack. She received the call on a Tuesday afternoon and became completely paralyzed. "I need to go," she said, but didn't move. "Then let's go," Ethan responded immediately. Natasha's hometown was 6 hours' drive away in Yorkshire. Small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. Ethan drove while Natasha looked out the window in silence, processing. "We haven't spoken in 3 years," she said finally. "He didn't approve of my move to London. Said I was abandoning the family, getting too big for my boots." "And you?" "I needed to leave, needed to build my own life. He wanted me to stay, marry someone local, have children, repeat the cycle." Natasha wiped a tear. "He never understood my dreams." They arrived at the hospital late at night. Natasha's mother was in the waiting room, looking 10 years older than in photos. When she saw her daughter, she began to cry. "Natasha, you came." "Of course I came, Mum. How is he?" "Stable, but it was serious." Natasha's mother noticed Ethan for the first time. "Who's this?" "My boyfriend, Ethan." The introduction was tense. Natasha's mother evaluated Ethan with critical eyes, his expensive watch, designer clothes, confident posture. Everything that represented the world Natasha had chosen over family. "Is it serious between you?" she asked abruptly. "Very," Ethan answered before Natasha could. They spent the night at the hospital. Ethan brought coffee, food, offered silent comfort. He watched Natasha with her family, the complicated dynamic, love mixed with resentment, harsh words hiding genuine concern. When they finally allowed visits, Natasha went in alone. Her father was pale, frailer than she remembered. He opened his eyes when she approached. "Natasha." "Hi, Dad." Heavy silence. Then he said, "Thought you wouldn't come." "I'd always come. You're my father." "Even after everything I said? The terrible things?" Natasha sat in the chair beside the bed. "Even so, family is complicated, but it's still family." Her father held her hand, weak but firm. "I'm sorry for not understanding, for not supporting your dreams, for making you feel you had to choose." Tears fell freely now. "I'm sorry too, for leaving without really explaining, for cutting contact. Your mother shows me your photos on social media. You look happy, successful." "I am, but something was always missing. Your blessing." "You always had it, love, even when I didn't show it." The reconciliation didn't erase 3 years of hurt instantly, but it was a beginning. Natasha spent the week in town, dividing time between hospital and family home. Ethan stayed even when she suggested he return. "I'm not leaving you to face this alone," he insisted. His presence brought comfort, but also complications. The small town wasn't used to people like Ethan, and they certainly gossiped about Natasha returning with a rich boyfriend. "Is it true he owns a company in London?" a neighbor asked Natasha's mother. "Yes," Natasha answered before her mother could, "and I work with him as a business partner and life partner." Must be nice to have found a rich man. The insinuation irritated Natasha, but it was Ethan who responded. "Actually, I was lucky to find someone brilliant enough to improve my company." Natasha is responsible for our most profitable expansion in years. She doesn't need me financially. She chooses to be with me." The neighbor was speechless. But the incident reminded Natasha why she'd left: suffocating expectations, constant judgments, impossibility of being seen as more than the girl who got too big for the town. "I want to bring them to visit," Natasha said to her father before they returned. "You and Mum, to see my life, my work, understand I didn't abandon you, I just grew." "We'd like that," her father said, still weak but sincere. The journey back was lighter than the journey there. Ethan drove, Natasha processed. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For staying, for defending me, for not judging my messy family." "All families are messy in their own way." Ethan held her hand. "And I'll always stay, no matter what." But the ordeal brought unexpected consequences. Back at work, Natasha was distracted, emotional, different. She made small mistakes, nothing serious, but unusual for her. And tongues began to wag. "See, the pressure is too much for her," Ethan heard an employee comment. He wanted to defend her, but Natasha asked him not to. "I need to get through this alone, prove I can have difficult moments and still be reliable." It was a test of strength and vulnerability. Natasha had to learn that strength isn't never failing, it's getting back up when you fail. And Ethan had to learn that sometimes loving someone is giving space to fight their own battles. It took 2 weeks for Natasha to recover her rhythm. When she did, it was with a new perspective. The experience with her father had transformed her, softened some edges, shown her the value of forgiveness. "I spent so much time proving I was more than my origins," she confessed to Ethan. "But my origins are part of me. I don't need to reject them to embrace my future." The reconciliation with her family brought peace Natasha didn't know was missing. Her parents visited, were impressed by her life, proud in a way they'd never been when she was a child. Her mother cried seeing Natasha's office, finally understanding what her daughter had built. The 10th month brought a crisis that tested Ethan and Natasha in a way nothing had before. The company faced a scandal when a supplier was caught in a corruption scheme. Although Ethan's company wasn't directly involved, the association tarnished the reputation. Shares fell. Clients questioned. The press had a field day. In the midst of the chaos, Gerald, Ethan's uncle who'd always been hostile, began a campaign to remove Ethan from leadership. He claimed management was too distracted by office romances to pay attention to important matters. It was a low blow, and everyone knew it. But some shareholders began to question. In a tense board meeting, Gerald presented a motion of censure. "Ethan has lost focus," he argued. "Since he started this involvement, priorities have changed, and now look where we are." "The supplier scandal has nothing to do with Ethan or Natasha," Richard counter-argued. "It's bad luck and a problem any company could face." "But a well-managed company would have discovered it earlier," Gerald insisted. Natasha was present at the meeting. As director, she had the right. She listened to everything in growing, angry silence. "That's absurd." "It's true, and everyone here knows it." Natasha looked around the table. "Yes, Ethan and I have a relationship, but I separate my work from my personal life. I can show metrics, results, whatever you want. And as for this scandal, I identified the problematic supplier 3 weeks ago and recommended investigation. It's in the report I sent. If you'd listened, we'd be ahead of this." Gerald went red. Other board members checked emails, found Natasha's report. It was true, she'd warned but was ignored. The motion of censure failed, but the damage was done. Tension in the company was at its peak, clear divisions between Ethan's supporters and those who wanted change. That night, Ethan and Natasha sat in her flat, emotionally exhausted. "Maybe Gerald is right," Ethan said tiredly. "Maybe I am too distracted." "Don't start," Natasha warned. "You're the best leader this company has ever had. Innovative, fair, visionary. Don't let one bitter man's poisonous words make you doubt." "But what if he has a point? What if our relationship really is affecting my judgment?" Natasha felt cold fear. "What are you saying?" "I don't know." Ethan ran his hands through his hair. "I just know I can't put you in a position where you're constantly attacked for being with me. It's not fair." Fair would be you giving up on me because it's difficult. Natasha's voice trembled. Because that's exactly what everyone expects, that you'll eventually realize I'm not worth the headache. It's not about worth. It's exactly about that. Natasha stood, pacing agitatedly. When it gets difficult, when pressure increases, you consider giving up, exactly as I feared you would. Natasha, I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to ruin everything we've built. We've built? Ethan, I helped build this, my projects, my ideas, my work. It's not just your company, and I'm certainly not just your girlfriend causing problems. Tears ran down her face. I'm your partner, or I thought I was. Ethan saw the pain in her eyes and felt as if he'd been punched. You are, I'm sorry, You're scared, I understand. But Ethan, if we're going to be together, really together, you need to stop considering leaving me every time something threatens. You need to decide I'm a priority, not an option. The words echoed in the silence. Ethan knew she was right. For months, in every crisis, part of him always considered the easier path, giving up Natasha, returning to expectations, simplifying everything. But simplicity without her was just loneliness in disguise. You are a priority, he said firmly, and I'm sorry for making you doubt that even for a second. He pulled her close. I love you, Natasha, more than the company, more than my family's approval, more than the bloody peace, and if Gerald wants war, he'll have war, but it won't include giving you up. Natasha sank against him, sobbing. I'm so tired of fighting. I know, me too, but at least we're fighting together. In the following days, Ethan made difficult decisions. He confronted Gerald directly, making it clear that any future attack on Natasha would be considered a personal attack. He implemented a complete review of all suppliers, putting Natasha in charge, both to demonstrate confidence and to use her expertise. And for the first time, he seriously considered restructuring company ownership. Gerald had power because he had shares. If Ethan wanted true autonomy, he'd have to find a way to dilute the influence of toxic shareholders. It was Owen who suggested the solution. Go public. Make the company public. Dilutes the uncle's power, democratizes ownership, and frankly, gives you more freedom to lead as you think right. It was a massive change, something Ethan's grandfather would never have considered. But Ethan wasn't his grandfather, and he was tired of being hostage to traditions that no longer served. He presented the idea to the board. As expected, Gerald and some others opposed fiercely, but Richard surprised everyone by supporting. Family companies have an expiry date, he said calmly. They either evolve or die. I prefer evolution. The vote was tight, but it passed. The process of going public began, long, complex, but liberating. Natasha watched everything with admiration mixed with concern. Are you sure about this? It's huge. I'm sure. I won't let men like Gerald dictate how I live my life or run my company. It's time for real change. The transformation wouldn't be quick. It would take months, perhaps years to complete, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt he was in control of his own destiny. The 11th month brought the crisis no one saw coming. Natasha fainted during an important meeting. Ethan rushed her to hospital, heart in mouth, praying it wasn't anything serious. The doctors ran tests, exams, more tests. Natasha was pale but tried to maintain good humor. Probably just stress and exhaustion, she insisted. But when the results came, the doctor had a serious expression. It's not just stress. You have severe anemia and are exhausted to a dangerous limit. Your body is literally shutting down. What does that mean? Ethan asked, holding Natasha's hand. It means she needs to stop, completely. At least a month of absolute rest. The doctor looked at Natasha. How long have you been pushing yourself beyond limits? Since always, Natasha admitted quietly. But I can't stop now. I have projects, responsibilities. You have deteriorating health that will collapse completely if you don't rest. In the car going back, Natasha was too quiet. Ethan knew that silence. She was processing, planning how to continue working despite the doctor's orders. You're going to stop working, he said firmly. I can't. You can and will. Ethan, if I stop, they'll say I can't handle the pressure, that it was too much for me. that you should have chosen someone stronger. Damn them. Your health is more important than any opinion. But Natasha shook her head stubbornly. You don't understand. If I give up now, everything I've built crumbles. All the battles I've fought, all the proofs I've given, shattered because my body failed. Ethan parked the car and turned to her. Listen to what you're saying. You're willing to literally kill yourself to prove something to people who'll never really accept you anyway? It's not about them. It's about me. About proving to myself I can. You've already proved it. 1,000 times, Natasha. You have nothing more to prove. But she couldn't hear. The fear was too great. Fear of weakness, of failure, of being exactly what everyone predicted she'd be. In the following days, Natasha tried to continue working from home. Ethan would arrive and find her surrounded by papers, eyes red from tiredness, refusing to stop. You're killing yourself, he said, after finding her passed out over the laptop. I'm fine. You're not. Ethan sat beside her. And I know why. You're afraid that if you stop, if you show a moment of weakness, they'll use it against you. But Natasha, everyone has limits. Even you. Others don't need to prove anything when they need rest. No, and that's unfair. But you know what's even more unfair? Destroying your health because the world is cruel. Natasha began to cry, not delicate tears, but deep sobs coming from an exhausted place in her soul. Ethan held her while she broke, all the stress and pressure of months finally overflowing. I'm so tired, she sobbed, of having to be twice as good, of never being able to weaken, of every day being a battle just to be here. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry the world is like this. I'm sorry for all the times I didn't make things easier. Ethan kissed the top of her head. But please, please rest. Let me take care of you. Let the world wait for a month. It took 2 more days of persuasion, but Natasha finally agreed. Ethan personally took over her projects, delegated what he could, paused the rest. Some employees complained. Gerald made comments about unreliability. But Ethan didn't care. He took Natasha to the family's country house in the Cotswolds, far from the city, from the office, from all pressure. Just them, fresh air, and silence. The first days were difficult. Natasha was restless, anxious, checking email obsessively. Ethan gently took her phone away, replacing it with books, short walks, long conversations. I don't know who I am without work, she confessed one afternoon. Then let's discover together. And they discovered. Natasha learned to paint, something she'd always wanted to try but never had time. Ethan returned to playing piano, fingers remembering old songs. They cooked together, elaborate meals requiring attention and care. They talked about old dreams, versions of themselves that existed before work consumed everything. I wanted to be a photographer when I was a child, Natasha revealed. Take photos of people, capture real moments. Why didn't you? Didn't seem practical, didn't seem like something that would pay the bills. Ethan bought her a camera the next day. Natasha protested, but her eyes shone. She spent days experimenting, capturing light through trees, shadows on the veranda, expressions of Ethan when he thought she wasn't looking. You're talented at this, he said, looking at the photos. It's just a hobby. Doesn't have to be. Could be more if you wanted. The idea planted a seed, and as Natasha healed, physically through rest, emotionally through distance, she began to question things she'd always accepted as absolute truths. That work was her identity. That stopping was weakness. That success meant infinite sacrifice. What if I don't go back, she asked one night. Ethan looked at her, surprised. To the office? To that version of me, the one who's always proving, always fighting, always millimeters from breaking. Then don't go back. Be another version. Even if that means disappointing people, looking like they were right, that I was too weak. Natasha. Ethan held her face. You spent an entire year being extraordinary. Earned respect, led projects, saved contracts. If you choose to do differently now, it doesn't erase that. It just means you've evolved. The revelation was liberating and frightening. For so long, Natasha had defined herself by struggle. Who would she be without it? It took the entire month to begin answering that question. When they finally returned to the city, Natasha was different, calmer, more centered, less willing to sacrifice herself on the altar of others' approval. She returned to work, but with boundaries, reasonable hours, free weekends, not responding to every email immediately. Some interpreted it as lack of commitment, but Natasha didn't care as much as she would have before. "I can be excellent at what I do without destroying myself in the process," she said to Ethan. "Took too long to learn that." The change in her inspired change in him. Ethan began to delegate more, trust more, live more beyond work, rediscovering hobbies, cultivating friendships, remembering there was a whole world beyond meeting rooms. The year was ending. So much had changed since that Tuesday in September, when Ethan heard a laugh and woke up to possibilities. There had been victories and defeats, achievements and collapses, moments of strength and devastating weakness. But through it all they'd survived, more than survived, evolved, grown, become better versions of themselves. And the best was yet to come. The 12th month brought spring and with it, renewal. Natasha's health was completely restored, but she was different now, wiser about her limits, more willing to establish boundaries. The company's process of going public was progressing well. Investors showed real interest. Gerald, realizing he'd lose control, tried one last move, offered to buy Ethan's shares for an absurd amount. "It's your chance to start over," Gerald argued, "free from all this mess, this situation with the girl." Ethan didn't even need to think. "No, be reasonable. I'm offering double the market value. And I'm saying no. This company is my legacy, not something I sell because you're uncomfortable with my personal choices." The refusal infuriated Gerald, but also marked the end. He had no more leverage, no more power to threaten. It was a victory, silent but complete. Natasha watched everything with pride. Seeing Ethan firm in his convictions, refusing the easy path, choosing integrity over convenience, reinforced why she loved him. But spring also brought an unexpected surprise. Natasha was organizing her photos, the hobby she'd continued after returning, when she received an email. A small but respected art gallery had seen her work online and wanted to exhibit some pieces. "It's probably a mistake," she said to Ethan, "or it's recognition of your talent." Natasha went to meet the gallery owner, expecting it to be a mistake or that the connection with Ethan had influenced. But the man, a veteran artist of 60, didn't even know who Ethan was. "Your photos have something rare," he said, examining Natasha's portfolio. "They capture not just images but feelings. This one here," he pointed to a photo of a construction worker resting in the sun, "tells an entire story in a single frame." "Thank you." "So will you exhibit?" Natasha thought. This was completely new territory, something of hers that had nothing to do with Ethan or the company or trials. It was purely her talent, her vision, her art. "Yes," she said, surprised by her certainty. "Yes, I'll exhibit." The exhibition was small, just 15 photos in a gallery few people knew. But it was hers. Ethan helped set up, insisted on paying for framing. She protested, but gave in when he argued it was an investment in her art. The opening was on a Thursday night. Natasha was nervous in a different way than before important meetings. This was personal, in a way work never was. Ethan brought champagne. Marcus brought friends. Natasha's parents drove 6 hours to be there. Her mother crying with pride, her father still weak from the heart attack but recovering, saying, "I always knew you were special, love." Even Margaret and Richard appeared, surprising Natasha completely. "We wouldn't miss this," Margaret said, examining the photos with a critical eye that gradually softened in approval. "You have a real eye for composition. I learned by watching people, looking for true moments amidst all the performance." Margaret looked at her with something new in her eyes, not just acceptance but genuine respect. "You're more than I imagined, Natasha Cole. Much more." The night was a modest success. Some photos sold. Local critics mentioned the exhibition favorably. It wasn't a meteoric debut, but it was authentic. And for Natasha, it was a revelation. She could be more than one thing, could be brilliant executive and sensitive artist, could have corporate career and creative expression, didn't have to choose just one path. "I'm proud of you," Ethan said when they were finally alone, after everyone had left. Why? This is nothing compared to what I do at the company. It's everything compared to what you do at the company, because this is purely yours. You don't have to prove anything to anyone here. It's just Natasha creating beauty because she wants to. She kissed him right there in the middle of the empty gallery, surrounded by her own creations. Thank you for encouraging me to try. I'll always encourage you to grow. In all directions. The following months brought new balance. Natasha continued excellent at work, but also dedicated time to photography. She began a project documenting urban workers, invisible people who keep cities functioning, porters, street cleaners, delivery drivers, street vendors. Why this theme? Ethan asked. Because for years I was invisible too. And now that they see me, I want to use this to show others that no one really looks at. The project gained traction. A national magazine published a photo essay. Invitations for larger exhibitions began to arrive. Natasha was building a second career, second purpose. And Ethan? He was rediscovering his own passions. He began drawing architecture again, not professionally, but as creative exercise. He designed a renovation for the company office, incorporating innovative design that humanized the corporate space. The employees loved it. You're talented at this, Owen commented. Ever thought about taking courses, maybe certification? Ethan had thought about it, and for the first time in years, seriously considered doing something just because he loved it, not because it was expected of him. They were evolving together, each becoming more complete, more multidimensional, and paradoxically, the more they developed separate interests, the closer they became. Because they understood now that true love isn't losing yourself in the other. It's finding yourself through the other's support. In December, a year after making the relationship public, the company completed the process of going public. Shares were launched, investors bought, and suddenly the power structure changed completely. Gerald sold his shares and left, unable to accept the new reality. Ethan remained as CEO, but with a diversified board that included Natasha as Director of International Operations. Richard became board chairman, Owen CFO. It was modern family, not just blood, but choice. At the party celebrating the transition, Ethan asked for attention. The room fell quiet. This year has taught us many things, he began, about change, evolution, courage to challenge traditions that no longer serve. My grandfather built this company on solid foundations. My father sustained it through difficult times. And now, together, we're transforming it into something new, something that honors the past but embraces the future. He looked directly at Natasha. But the most important changes weren't corporate. They were personal. I learned that strength isn't never showing weakness, that leadership is giving space for others to shine, that tradition is only worth it when we create space for innovation. Natasha realized everyone was looking between her and Ethan. There was something in the air, anticipated tension. Ethan crossed the room to her, and there, in front of employees, family, investors, he knelt. Natasha Cole, you woke me when I was sleeping through life. You challenged me when I needed to be challenged. You loved me when I didn't deserve to be loved. You showed me that some things, the best things, are worth any battle. He took a small box from his pocket. When he opened it, it revealed an extraordinary ring, not extravagant, but perfectly Natasha. Simple, elegant, with a blue stone that captured light. Be my partner, officially, publicly, eternally. Marry me. The room was completely silent. Natasha had tears running down her face, but was smiling so big it seemed her face would break. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes! Ethan put the ring on her finger and kissed her as the room exploded in applause. Not everyone was applauding. Some looked uncomfortable, some were already leaving. But it didn't matter. Because Ethan and Natasha had fought enough battles, proved themselves enough times, and now finally they could just be two people who loved each other, building a future together against all odds. The following 6 months were a whirlwind of wedding planning and business changes. Natasha insisted on doing things her way. Small wedding, intimate, focused on meaning over spectacle. My mother will have a heart attack if she knows we don't want a big wedding, Ethan warned. Then convince her that small can be beautiful. Surprisingly, it was Margaret who supported Natasha's vision. Big weddings are for impressing people you don't even like. Small ones are for celebrating with who really matters. The ceremony was scheduled for the garden of the country house in the Cotswolds, the same place where Natasha had healed months before. Just 50 guests. Marcus as Natasha's best man. Owen as Ethan's best man. But before the wedding, there were practical matters. Natasha and Ethan needed to decide where to live. Her flat was too small. His penthouse felt like a cold hotel. Let's look for something new, Ethan suggested. Something ours, that we choose together. It took 2 months of searching, but they found perfect. A flat overlooking Hyde Park, enough space for Ethan's office and a dark room for Natasha's photographs, large balcony where they could have breakfast on Sundays. They furnished together, each piece a negotiation and compromise. Natasha's books on Ethan's shelves, his piano in the shared living room, her plants everywhere, his minimalism balanced by her colors. Feels like home, she said when they finally finished. Because you're here. Work also evolved. Natasha took leadership in a new initiative, mentorship program for young professionals from non-traditional backgrounds. She wanted to give others what she hadn't had, someone believing in them from the start. It'll change the company's entire culture, Owen commented, in a good way. Ethan supported completely, even funding scholarships for candidates who couldn't afford necessary education. It was investment in people over profits, something Gerald would never have approved, but that defined the company's new direction. Natasha's photography was also gaining recognition. Her project about invisible workers was chosen for a touring national exhibition. Invitations to speak at universities began to arrive. You're becoming a public figure, Ethan joked. Scary, she admitted, but also exciting. One day, a journalist requested an interview for a profile about women who defy expectations. Natasha hesitated. She knew mentioning Ethan was inevitable and didn't want the story to become about them. But she decided to accept. It was time to control her own narrative. The interview was extensive, covering Natasha's childhood, journey from small Yorkshire town to London, challenges of proving herself in the corporate world. When they inevitably asked about Ethan, she was honest. Yes, I work with my fiancé, and that complicates things. There are people who'll always attribute my success to that connection, but there are also indisputable facts, metrics, results, independent evaluations. I learned I can't control what others think. I can only control my work, and my work speaks for itself. Any regrets? I regret not having trusted myself sooner, having let fear paralyze me for so long. But regret loving Ethan? Never. Even with all the complications, he made me better. The magazine published the interview with a beautiful photo of Natasha, not glamorous and polished, but real and radiant. The response was surprisingly positive. Women wrote telling similar stories. Young professionals asked for advice. Natasha realized that by being vulnerable, by admitting difficulties, she became more relatable, not less. Strength wasn't pretending perfection. It was recognizing flaws and continuing anyway. 2 weeks before the wedding, Natasha's parents visited to help with final preparations. The dynamic had changed completely. Where before there was tension, now there was genuine acceptance. Natasha's mother and Margaret even developed a strange friendship, bonded by shared experience of loving men who'd defied family expectations for them. My mother-in-law didn't speak to me for 5 years, Margaret told over lunch. Literally refused to acknowledge me at family events. How did you survive? Natasha's mother asked. Richard, he never wavered, never made me feel I was the problem, and eventually his love was enough until the rest of the family got tired of being cruel. Natasha heard this with new understanding. Margaret wasn't the story's villain. She was a woman who'd fought her own battles, developed hard armor to survive, and now was passing on lessons learned. Thank you, Natasha said impulsively, for giving me a chance. I know I wasn't who you imagined for Ethan. Margaret looked at her, eyes soft. No one ever is who we imagine, but you're exactly who he needs, and more importantly, he's who you need too. That's rare. The night before the wedding, Ethan and Natasha broke tradition and stayed together. They sat on the country house veranda, watching stars, reflecting on the journey. "Scared?" Natasha asked. "Terrified," Ethan admitted. "Not of the wedding, of how much I love you. Sometimes I think my heart can't hold everything I feel." "Me too." She rested her head on his shoulder. "But good scary, right? The best kind of scary." They stayed like that until dawn, talking about past and future, about all the battles they'd fought and those still to come. Because marriage wasn't the end of the story. It was just a new chapter in a story that kept writing itself. The wedding day dawned clear and golden. Natasha woke early, nerves dancing in her stomach but heart calm. It was the day she'd waited for so long, but not the way she'd imagined as a child. There was no princess dress. She'd chosen something simple but extraordinary. Ivory silk dress that flowed when she moved, loose hair with wildflowers woven through. Her reflection in the mirror showed someone happy, genuinely radiant. Marcus knocked on the door. "Ready?" "More than ever." Ethan waited in the garden, and when Natasha began walking toward him, not led by her father but walking alone because that was her choice, he couldn't contain tears. She was absolutely beautiful, not because of clothes or makeup, but because of the light emanating from her. Pure happiness made visible. The ceremony was conducted by a friend of Richard's, a retired judge who'd known the family for decades. But it was the vows Natasha and Ethan wrote that really mattered. Ethan went first. "Natasha, for years I lived on autopilot, following scripts written by others. You woke me, showed me that truly living requires courage to defy expectations, including one's own. I promise never to go back to sleep. I promise to see you, really see you, every day. I promise to fight beside you, not for you because I respect your strength too much. I promise to build a life where we can both be completely ourselves." Natasha could barely see through tears when her turn came. "Ethan, when I met you, I was invisible. I became visible through struggle, work, determination. But with you, I learned that true visibility comes from being seen by those who love us. You see me, all the parts, even the ones I tried to hide. I promise to continue growing, changing, evolving, and trust you'll grow with me. I promise my achievements will always be mine, but my joys always ours. I promise to build a life where we can both dream big." When they were declared married and Ethan kissed Natasha, the 50 guests applauded. But for them, the world reduced to just two hearts that found their way to each other against all odds. The reception was exactly as they wanted. Intimate, joyful, real. No long formal speeches, just shared stories. Marcus told about Natasha at university, so determined she'd study until she fainted. Owen revealed Ethan had spent weeks rehearsing how to greet Natasha after he realized his feelings. Richard made a simple but powerful toast. "Sometimes the best thing we do is get out of our children's way. Ethan, you chose your own path, and Natasha, you built yours. Together, you'll create something extraordinary." When music began, Ethan led Natasha to the improvised dance floor. They danced close, moving as if they'd always known each other's steps. "Happy?" he whispered. "More than words can express." "Then I'll have to find other ways to make you even happier." She laughed, a sound he'd never tire of hearing. "I accept the challenge." The party extended until dawn. Natasha's parents danced with Margaret and Richard. Marcus and Natasha's friends traded stories with Ethan's colleagues. Worlds that had seemed so separate mixed naturally. It was Carmen, the employee who'd supported Natasha during difficult times, who said something that stayed. "You know what I admire about you two? You didn't pretend it would be easy, didn't romanticize the struggle, but you fought anyway. It's the realest love I've ever seen." When they finally left, not for an extravagant honeymoon, but for a quiet week at their own country house, Natasha looked back one last time. She saw family, friends, all the people who'd helped shape them. "It was worth it," she said. "Every difficult moment, every tear, every doubt, worth it to get here." "And this is just the beginning," Ethan responded. 6 months after the wedding, Natasha discovered she was pregnant. The news came as a surprise. They weren't actively trying but weren't preventing either. When the test showed positive, she stood in the bathroom for long minutes, processing. A baby, a new life, responsibility that would change everything. She told Ethan that night during dinner. He dropped his fork, mouth open, then began to laugh, not with humor, but with pure, incredulous joy. "Really? Really?" He pulled her into a hug so tight she could barely breathe. "We're going to have a baby, our child." Scary, right? The best kind of scary. The pregnancy brought inevitable reflections. Natasha thought about what kind of mother she wanted to be. Not perfect, but present. Not suffocating, but supportive. Teaching their child that value comes from character, not surname or position. Ethan thought about what kind of father he wanted to be, different from his own in some ways, similar in others, present in small things, encouraging dreams even if they didn't make practical sense. "Our child will grow up knowing they're loved unconditionally," Natasha said one night, hand on her still flat belly, "and that they can be anything, absolutely anything." They prepared for months, transformed the spare room into a nursery, painting walls soft yellow because they didn't want to know the sex. Ethan assembled the cot, studying instructions with intense concentration. Natasha organized tiny clothes that barely seemed real. Work continued, but with adjustments. Natasha reduced hours, delegated more. Not because she was incapable, but because priorities had changed. She was still a brilliant executive, still led important projects, but now she knew balance was possible. Ethan also changed. Took fewer trips, spent more time working from home. The company continued thriving, perhaps precisely because leaders were happier, more balanced. Owen took on more operational responsibilities, revealing himself an excellent leader. Natasha's mentorship program had brought fresh blood to the company, talented young people from diverse backgrounds bringing fresh perspectives. "The company is evolving," Richard commented during a board meeting. "It's no longer just a family business, it's something bigger and better," Margaret added. She'd developed an active role in the company's philanthropic side, using her experience and connections to expand social impact. Natasha gave birth on an autumn afternoon. After 12 hours of labor, Eleanor, name chosen because it meant light, arrived in the world crying with powerful lungs. Ethan held his daughter for the first time, and knew life had changed irrevocably. That small, dependent, perfect being was responsibility and joy, eclipsing everything else. Natasha watched husband and daughter, heart so full it seemed impossible. This was the family they'd created. Not perfect, but real. Not easy, but valuable beyond measure. The first months with Eleanor were challenging. Sleepless nights, fears about every little thing, constant learning. But they were also magical. First smiles, tiny fingers gripping large ones, sweet baby smell both never tired of. Margaret was a devoted grandmother, visiting regularly, teaching Natasha tricks she'd learned with Ethan decades ago. Natasha's parents drove monthly to see their granddaughter, bringing home-cooked meals and practical help. Marcus was a dedicated godfather, arriving with absurd gifts and willingness to hold the baby whenever Natasha needed a break. The community around them, family, friends, colleagues, formed a support network that made it possible to navigate new parenthood while maintaining careers. A year after Eleanor's birth, Natasha was back at work part-time leading selected projects. She'd also resumed photography, but with a new focus, documenting real motherhood. Not Instagram-perfect versions, but raw and beautiful reality. The project resonated deeply. Mothers wrote thanking for showing it was okay not to be perfect, that it was okay to struggle, that it was okay to love motherhood and sometimes want to escape it too. "You're changing conversations," Ethan said, looking at responses to her latest exhibition. "I'm just being honest, about everything." Ethan had also evolved. He'd taken on a more consultative role in the company, allowing a new generation of leaders, including 3 people from Natasha's mentorship program, to take over daily operations. He'd gone back to school, doing a master's in sustainable architecture. "It's never too late to follow old dreams," he explained when Natasha asked why now. "I'm proud of you. I learned from the best." On a Sunday afternoon, 2 years after the wedding, 3 years after making the relationship public, 4 years since that Tuesday when everything changed, Natasha and Ethan sat in the park near their home. Eleanor slept in the pram, chubby-cheeked and absolutely perfect. Sun filtered through trees, creating patterns of light and shadow. Couples strolled, children laughed. Life happened around them. Happy? Ethan asked the question he'd asked so many times. Natasha thought about everything they'd been through. Battles fought, victories won, wounds healed. Thought about who they were when they met. Her invisible and desperate for recognition. Him alive, but not really living. Thought about who they were now. True partners, parents learning together, people still challenging each other to grow. More than happy, she answered. Complete. Not because you complete me, because together we created a life that completes us. Ethan kissed her, a simple gesture carrying years of love, struggle, choice, because that was the truth about them. It wasn't fate or chance. It was choice. Repeated every day. Choice to see each other, to fight for each other, to grow with each other, to build something real even when it would have been easier to give up. Eleanor woke, looking around with curious eyes. Natasha picked her up, lifting her high. The baby giggled, a sound that was pure joy. And in that moment, warm sun, family together, future open ahead. Natasha knew with absolute certainty that every difficult step, every tear shed, every battle fought had brought her exactly where she should be. Not because it was easy, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And real, with all its imperfections and challenges, was infinitely better than any fantasy. Ethan held her hand, intertwining fingers as they'd done so many times. Didn't say anything because he didn't need to. Everything that mattered was in that touch. Promise, partnership, love that survived storms and emerged stronger. They walked together through the park, Eleanor between them, sun setting, painting the sky gold and pink. They didn't know exactly what the future would bring. There would be more challenges, certainly. More moments of doubt, of tiredness, of questioning choices. But there would also be joy, growth, love deepening with each shared year. And in the end, that's what mattered. Not where they started, or how many obstacles they faced, but that they chose, every day, in every difficult moment, chose each other, chose real love over easy convenience, chose growth over stagnation, chose courage over fear. And that choice, repeated infinitely, transformed not just their lives but created a legacy. For Eleanor, who'd grow up seeing love as equal partnership. For the company, which had become more human, more inclusive. For everyone who witnessed their journey and learned it's never too late to wake up, to see, to choose differently. Natasha looked at Ethan. He looked back, and in his eyes she saw a reflection of everything they were, everything they are, everything they'd still be. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.